Some things just scream amateur, like a red flag with the word amateur printed on it. And those red flags could be flying over your writing. There are a lot of things that beginners do in the pursuit of prose that should be brought to a stop, because red flag means stop. I don't know who greenlit that joke. Anyway, today we're going to go over some common red flags of amateur writing that you should avoid. Starting with red flag number 1, too much segmentation in your writing. Prose in fiction basically fits into one of 4 buckets. You've got narrative, which is action and characters moving around the scene. You've got description, which describes what everything looks, smells, tastes, and feels like. You've got dialogue, which is the characters talking to each other, and you have exposition, which is any background information or world building information or other information that's delivered to the reader that doesn't fit into one of the other 3 categories. Weaving these 4 buckets together is tricky, so a lot of new writers tend to just segment their writing into different blocks. Here I'm going to describe the scene, and then there's going to be some action where the 2 characters come together, and then they're going to have a conversation, and then after that I'll dump a bunch of expository information. When you have blocks of just one type of prose, it can often lead to problems. A big block of just exposition is an info dump. A big block of just dialogue is white room syndrome. A big block of just action can get repetitive and monotonous. A big block of just description doesn't really move the story forward and kind of brings things to a stop. Ideally, prose should move in between these 4 different buckets almost constantly, to the point where distinguishing between the 4 actually gets kind of tricky. You may have characters talking, dialogue, while they are moving around the scene, action, so you have some action beats in between the dialogue, and as they move around, you probably also have a little bit of description, and then maybe there's a little bit of exposition as well, either implied through the dialogue or maybe sprinkled in with the description. In an ideal world, every sentence should serve more than one of these buckets. So a character might say a line of dialogue that somehow describes the setting in some way, and that description also results in some exposition. If that dialogue sounds natural, like something someone would actually say, then that can work really well. If you find that your prose is too blocked into different purposes, if you find that all your description is in one paragraph, and then you have a bunch of dialogue, and then you have a bunch of action, that can be a sign that your prose is too segmented, and that is a red flag. Red flag number 2, using too many numbers in description. I guess if you use more than 5 numbers in a description, that's too many. Numbers can be used in description quite effectively, and you will use them sometimes. 3 cans sat on the shelf. The gazebo had sat unused for 10 years. Only 1 person showed up to Gerard's birthday party. Using too many numbers in your description, though, can be a bit of a problem, especially when you rely on numbers to describe quantities or dimensions. The descriptions in your writing should not be a technical blueprint of the scene, and too many numbers will lead to that. The issue with numbers is that oftentimes they don't create any sort of feeling in the reader. The reader may have difficulty picturing a quantity or a dimension that's described with numbers, but they will be able to picture something better if the description uses a feeling. This is true even if you have a character whose voice would make it logical for them to explain something in numbers. Like if you have a general, they're likely going to roughly estimate the number of cavalry that's facing them on the opposite hill, and the fact that that hill is 500 paces away. You can still weave those numbers into your description, but you should also work in something that creates a feeling, saying something like the opposite hill was swarming with enemy horsemen, close enough that you could see their breath in the bright, cool morning. Numbers are a very concrete way to describe a scene, but a lot of new writers forget that the descriptions also have to evoke emotion. Too many numbers is one red flag too many. Red flag number 3, telling too big of a story. Joseph Stalin famously said that 1 death is a tragedy, 1,000,000 deaths is a statistic. This is perhaps counterintuitive because you'd think bigger scale and bigger impact would lead to more engagement, but that's not often the case. The ability for a reader to feel emotion about something or about somebody else is very limited in scope. It's hard to imagine the large-scale suffering of 1 million people, but when you see the suffering of 1 or 2 people on the page, it's much easier to connect with. Even if your story has a large world with epic scope and lots of stuff going on, you still want to focus on telling a small story, generally. You need to hone in on the experience of a few characters. This doesn't even necessarily mean having a smaller cast, but rather focusing on the experiences of those characters rather than spending too much time talking about the events happening in the world. If you want to convey things about the events happening in the world, convey those things through these specific concrete experiences of the characters that we're following. Small stories set within a larger world will always be more impactful. I could say more on this, but I want to keep this part of the video short, so. Red flag number 4, starting with sympathy instead of rooting interests. This is a mistake that sometimes happens towards the beginning of a story. There's a saying in the writing world that you have to earn your endings, and this applies to more than just endings. Your reader needs a connection to your story before they will begin feeling anything about it. The hardship your characters suffer is going to fall flat if the reader doesn't care about those characters. I mean, they're called characters after all. A lot of writers start their stories off with a scene that is meant to make the reader feel sympathy for the character before the reader has even connected with that character. Having the rest of a character's village get slaughtered by Vikings is impactful and all, but if we don't know the character yet, if we haven't been given a reason to care about their family, if we don't know anything about the life that they lived before Vikings came and burned all parts of that life to the ground, it's going to be difficult for the reader to connect with this. Rushing to give a character a tragic backstory before the reader cares about that character is not good. You need a reader connection before you do that, or you're just wasting time. The first scenes within your story should be about connecting a reader with the character and the world, giving them a reason to become interested and invested in that character. That can come through sympathy, but it also could be curiosity, likability, or competency. This is a very difficult thing to do because you're at the whims of reader reaction, and different readers will connect with different characters for different reasons. But that's true of most things in writing, so. And the last red flag that we'll talk about today, not answering basic reader questions. Getting answers to questions is fundamentally why readers keep reading. Unanswered questions are really the basis for telling a story. The biggest question that goes unanswered being, how does this story end? However, when unanswered questions lead to confusion or frustration in the reader, that's a problem. There's a difference between posing an intriguing mystery and just not giving information that the reader needs to have in order to understand the story. I wrote a story once where there was this specific object that was used as a form of currency in the world, but I didn't make it clear that that object was used as currency, and a lot of my critique partners were confused about that and spent a lot of time focusing on that and had a lot of questions and missed so much else in the story just because I didn't explain this one thing. I didn't realize, the reader didn't realize this realization, and I didn't answer the question because I didn't realize that this was a real question. It was a really big problem. You always have to be thinking about where the reader could get confused, what questions they're going to have, and how you're answering those questions. Ideally, you want to make sure that the questions the reader has are the questions you want them to have. Remember that you're way more experienced with your story than other people are. You unconsciously fill in all sorts of gaps as you go, and the reader can't do that because they don't have the same level of familiarity that you do. Always think about questions that the reader is going to have. Does anybody have any questions? Too bad, because the video is over, and also this is pre-recorded from when you're watching it, so I am temporally unable to answer any of your questions. So anyway, I'd love to hear what you think about this in the comments down below. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.